My chosen haircut is a classic triangular graduation or graduated bob. So what I'm going to be doing is, I'm going to be doing the full wet cut for you, which is all the internal shape. So when I cut a classic graduated bob, what I do is I focus on one technique first, and that is the graduation. So I only focus on the graduation. So we're going to do all the internal shape first. I've already dried a mannequin and pre-cut it, so you'll be able to see the end result straight away without having to wait for me to blow dry it. Hi everybody, I hope you're all okay. So just a very brief synopsis into what we're doing. We are going to be looking at how you map the hair. So the first thing I do is I start from the crown. I take 2 4 diagonal sections just kind of below the recession of the hairline. This isolates the section above because with this section here, it's going to have a little bit more of a direction than the previous sections. Then we have a vertical profile section, which works to just above the occipital bone. And then we take a forward diagonal on each side. Okay, so the forward diagonal is going to mirror the shape of the weight, the direction the weight is going to go in. So we're going to be starting this haircut with a vertical cutting section. So quite often when I teach this haircut, a lot of people ask me, and they're quite surprised, that we're actually going to start this haircut internally opposed to creating an outline first. So the outline will come at the end, the line aspect will come at the end, the graduation is what comes first. So I start vertical because it gives me full control over the shape from bottom to top. This is significant because the choice of length of this particular section here, this choice of length controls the position of the weight line. So the longer you choose to leave this section, the lower the weight line will sit, the heavier it's going to look. Whereas the shorter, the higher on the head and flatter the appearance of weight. So we understand where the choice of length comes in, but now we look at something else, which is called distribution. The angle of your finger when cutting this is significant because the lower I choose to position my fingers, the heavier and more rapid the increase in length. Whereas when I allow my section to work closer to the vertical, the weight looks flatter and the weight looks softer. So just to reiterate that, our distribution means the choice of cut line, okay? And what this means is the angle of your finger. So the lower your finger, the heavier, the higher, the softer. Elevation, anything below this point here is going to build weight. So you haven't got to be pulling this very, very low. The lower it's pulled, the heavier. So we know that the choice of length controls the starting position of my weight line, whereas my distribution and elevation control the characteristics of the weight line. So we're working vertically triangular, which means my cutting line is going from short into long. If you've just joined me, everybody, I'm thrilled to be with you today. I am very proud to announce that I'm now an ambassador for Arc Scissors. I'm using the Arc Harmony 5-inch scissor today. And I'm going to be doing you a beautiful triangular graduation. This haircut will start the inside and we'll cut the outside when dry. So you can see with the silhouette my vertical shape, and you can see where that weight, where the length was chosen controls where the weight line will start to appear in the haircut. Hey Gareth, I hope you're well. Just trying to keep an eye on it for everybody as well. Now, all of our sections here, from this point we have a choice. I'm choosing to pivot all of my cutting sections until my final section is working parallel to the mapping section. So why do I pivot? Well, if I simply work vertical like this and use over direction to increase the length traveling to behind the ear, the top and the bottom of the section will ultimately get longer and heavier to behind the ear. This means you're going to be building a corner at the bottom and corners at the top. It'll be very flat and very heavy behind the ear. When you pivot in this particular fashion, the bottom doesn't increase, but the top does. And you'll see that in a moment when I'm doing it. Okay, just having a quick look. How you doing, everybody? So again, my sections pivot from section 1. And I'm going to be over-directing section 2 onto the base of 1. What is over-direction? Over-direction is the control of moving the hair side to side. It's one of the main controls to the horizontal shape. So as I come through here, one of the things I look for in any equipment I use, any scissors I use, or I look for 2 things. One is I want the blade to be semi-convex. That means the blade has a slight curve. That means that it is very robust. When a blade is convex or semi-convex, it's going to be more robust. It can take out quite large amounts of hair. But I look for the tip of the blade to also be very fine. This helps you to really craft and refine outlines. Essentially, when the tip of the scissor is very fine, you can remove very small amounts of hair with a lot more accuracy. So one of the things that pulled me to the Harmony was it's a very delicate blade, and yet whilst it's lightweight and it doesn't have really massive width to the actual blades, it's still got a very fine point, but it's incredibly robust. I could cut a detailed precision haircut, and I could also cut a long shag or butterfly haircut. So what you'll start to see is my sections are pivoting round, okay? But one thing you've got to do is your body position, okay? It has to be flat to the front. Your body has to, if you're like this, you'll be over-directing it towards you. Wherever you're stood, your hands will follow you. So if you move over to here, your hands are going to come with you. And if we're allowing the over-direction to move forward, we're reducing the increase in length, and we're probably going to end up with it being too short. So where you're stood, when I teach people, one of the first things I observe is where they stand when they cut. And that has a huge amount of calibrating the control you have over the mechanics of the haircut. So I'm allowing each section to find its guideline from the previously cut section. So we're currently on section 6. So section 5 is my guideline. So when I lift this long piece of hair here, there's my guideline. So as the sections pivot, it means the length is not increasing around here, but it is increasing at the top. Let's try and have a little look. There we go. I was watching live from Arc of the Day with one of their art team members, and that is with Chris. Oh, he's such a talented guy. And I learned a lot because he uses like texturizers and texturizing scissors, thinning scissors to do a lot of cutting. And I learned a lot from his particular tutorial. And I like the fact this one is kind of contrasting because we're looking at a very, very classic shape that isn't probably as commercial. But one of the reasons I like to teach haircuts like this is because they're so pragmatic. The explanations, like this haircut I'm doing for you was here before I was born, and it'll be here after I'm gone. It has a huge amount of education in it because you can explain literally every single section you're cutting and why. It's not really a subjective cut, it's got that element of precision. And what's so good about, for me, teaching precision is the haircuts are kind of quite easy to read because there's a logical sense behind each reason. And I find that quite cathartic personally, Okay. Where can you purchase the comb? The comb, this is from a company called Mazzella and Partners. He sells these combs. So I take the diagonal back section because I'm going to cross-check my work, and I pull the hair back, and I'm just going to cross-check it, and hopefully it's okay. Yeah. Thank God I can still cut hair. So as you pull this down, that is one side of our graduation done. Thank you so much, Manny. I hope you're okay. Looking forward to seeing you in Dubai later this year. The other side, I've got to have a little walk round, getting the steps in. But ultimately, on this side, my finger angle was downwards, okay? But on the opposite side, you've got to shift, because as you're working round, you can't really like contort your body to continue with the knuckle underneath. So the knuckle has to come on top. So this doesn't necessarily change dramatic amounts, but it's just something to consider, because any inconsistencies with you will create an inconsistency in the outcome. So it's very important that you do manage your mechanics and ensure that you're not on autopilot. Oh, thank you very much, Oliver there. Oliver Twist, love that handle. So you see, as I'm pulling this now, as I'm pulling this now, the elevation is coming slightly down. Now, elevation is one of the controls to how heavy the appearance of my graduation is. Another control is the angle of my finger. I've not allowed my finger angle to be too low. I prefer my graduated bobs to be very fluid and very blended without the line. I struggle with the right hand side. See, it might look like I'm right-handed because I'm using the front view of my camera, but I'm actually left-handed. But I use right-handed scissors just to make it a little bit more confusing. I mean, I would suggest that you film one of the things I did when I retrained was I used to film myself cutting hair, and I would watch it back, because if you were watching somebody cut hair, you would be able to spot a mistake. You know, you could spot if my over direction was wrong, or if there was an inconsistency with something I was doing, you would spot it. And I would suggest that you film yourself cutting hair and watch it back. I used to do that, and I would make a list of things that I could see that were clearly, not correct. So I would make that list, and the next day when I approached the same haircut again and tried to, get a personal best with that haircut, I would have this list that gave me an insight into what wasn't correct. So, like, it's good that you know that side isn't your right one. So I would film yourself cutting it and see where you're stood. See where your body is when you're cutting. Because if it's glaringly different to the other side, that possibly could be your issue. See, this is my easy side, hence why I decided to... how you doing? Thank you from California. I love California. I'm going back there next year to do some classes. I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited to go back to America later this year as well. I'll be in Connecticut and Virginia Beach, so I'm thrilled. Yeah, good question. Thank you for that question. I've just seen it. If I'm doing a client and the hairline is really difficult here, how would I vary this haircut? Thank you for that question. So if I'm doing a client and their hairline is incredibly difficult, I actually would change the angle of my haircut, the angle of my distribution. So we talked about distribution being one of the controls to how heavy or how soft, but I would actually be cutting this flatter, like so. Now, if I'm cutting it flatter, I've still got the length I want at the top, but I just have much more length around the hairline. So why do we need that length at the hairline? To help control any natural fall or any natural hairline that is difficult. So my advice is, if I was doing a client and the hairline was incredibly difficult, my cutting line would be different. It would be flatter. Dom, how you doing, brother? I hope you're well. What an amazing hairdresser. Oh, fabulous. I'm all nervous now. So ultimately, I would change my choice of distribution from triangular to square. My square cutting line will be flat, which means I'm going to keep length on the nape, which will help me control the hairline. Hey, Sarah, hope you're well. Oh, it's crazy. So, yeah, I'm thrilled to be able to spend this time with you. And like I say, I'm very proud to be an ambassador for ARC. I think, obviously I'm going to say that, but I genuinely am, because I find they do so much for the industry. They do so many different shows. They're very forward thinking, and that was one of the biggest things that pulled me to them, was that the thing that will motivate me in having any partnership with any company is never financial. It's what opportunities will I get from being part of your team to improve. Like, how can I, improve myself by being part of this? Because ultimately, the better I am, the more valuable I am. So I'm always looking to improve myself. Oh, you're not using this time? No, absolutely not. No, all about arc now. So yeah, I'm using the Harmony 5-inch, beautiful scissor. And as I'm coming through here, you can see, I always take little mouthfuls when it comes to the scissors. I don't go in and take massive chunks. I always feel that when I'm cutting and I take really big chunks, well, not chunks, but I take a big snip, I feel you can kind of see where you've been. But when I take quite small steps with my scissor, my shear, whatever we're calling it, I feel that the line is much softer and allows for when the roots breathe in at the end. Because everybody's roots, as they dry, will breathe in, they will go, they will lift slightly. So we obviously vary our use of tension to compensate for things like that. So the stronger the root area, the lower the tension generally as a rule. So when you are cutting, if the actual client's hair, like if I'm getting to here and suddenly the root pattern is changing, I would lower my tension by possibly using the wide part of my comb instead of the narrow part, as that will give me less tension. Or I will allow less tension in my fingers as I'm controlling and grooming the section. Now, our next sections no longer pivot. They're going to remain parallel to the mapping section. So all the next sections are going to be forward diagonal, okay? Hi Josh, how are you, my good man? Let's notice Josh LaMonica's joined. Possibly the best barber in the world. Absolute Jedi he is. So I am now bringing my next section over the top. So this for me was very confusing, guys, because we now have this veil. And this veil is clearly has to be cut, doesn't it? It's very clear to us that that veil has to be cut because the length is significantly longer than the hair underneath. So how do we know what to cut? Well, firstly, if we remove the veil, like this is the hair that we've got to cut. When you go to take the top of that weight line, the top of this weight line, that is our guideline. Okay, so we've got to use the top of the weight line as a guide. We're going to knit these two sections together. Okay, what we control is the elevation, our choice of how high or how low these two sections are knitted together controls how quickly the length increases vertically. Now, the faster the increase, the heavier, the more bulbous the shape will look. The higher, the slower the increase in length, which means there'll be a flatter, softer appearance, okay? So what if you don't know? What if you're doing this and you're just lost? Because I've been there. I would advise you to go lower than what you think. So I'm going to pull this down really quite low, okay? And I'm going to cut that. Now, when I release that section and comb it down, there's actually a slight step appeared in the haircut. So when you see the elevation going too low, it'll start to give you more of a line in your weight buildup. And that's obviously incorrect. So when that happens, I would want you to go through your section and just cross-check your section, okay? And as you cross-check it, I can see this amount of hair is out. There's roughly about ½ a centimetre out. So as I re-elevate my section, I wait until I find that amount. I remove it, and it blends in more seamlessly. So just to reiterate, all of our sections use the previous or the top of the weight line as its guideline. The over direction is pulled flat backwards. Now, I want you to imagine that you're cutting your line parallel to the wall behind you. So your distribution is flat, okay? Now as that comes down, you will start to get the increase in length. So the section is longer here than it is here, okay? So I'm going to recreate that on the other side. Any questions? I'm going to try and keep an eye on them. There he is, Josh. How you doing, James? I hope you're well, brother. James is another great advocate for arc scissors. I see him doing some well, I mean, literally every haircut James does, every colour. It's just it's like a front cover every time. It just is absolutely incredible. I want you to blow dry my hair, James. Give me a nice big bouncy blow dry. That'll be what I'm after. Okay, so that is what you do. All of the sections from here are cut forward diagonal. The sections at the back behind the ear are cut flat, square, parallel to the wall behind you. As we travel forward, there's going to be a change in the over direction, but I'll explain that when I come to it. Okay. So again, I'm taking my section. Trying to, you know what, it's like, I don't know how some people do this so well. They like really keep an eye on what they're doing and they're like totally multitasking. Having a little read. Okay, so I've got my section. So as this comes down on top, where's my guideline coming from? Okay, so where's the guideline? The guideline is coming from the previously cut section, okay? So I'm going to remove the hair from here. I'm going to knit these two together. Now what controls how heavy this looks, it is the elevation. So how high or how low you go is ultimately going to control how heavy it looks. Now remember, I said everything behind the ear is going to be pulled flat back to that imaginary wall behind you, okay? Now if you're working square, the characteristics of any shape when we work square is we will get a slow increase in length, okay? A slow increase in length. And when we work triangular, we get a rapid increase in length. Now, I'm cutting flat here. Now, when I get to the hair on the ear and in front, I take a step forward. So currently, I'm cutting it going in this direction. I need to now stand in a way where I'm going in this direction. So I'm standing just behind the ear. My body position is enabling me to use less over direction. Sorry about that. My wife's got a little puppy and he's very similar to me. He needs a lot of attention. So you see, as I'm pulling that back, I still blend it into what we're doing. But as it comes forward, it starts to give me that increase in length. Okay, but if we maintained that flat over direction all back, the increase in length would be too rapid and the contrast would be awkward, okay? So I'll just do the other side. So again, everything behind the ear, where is that pulled? It's pulled flat back. Where's the guideline? The previously cut section. Now, when we get to the ear, everything is pulled. Oh, thank you so much, Manny. That's very good. I say I'm looking forward to working with you in Dubai later this year. And yeah, Josh, I don't know what to say about Josh. I just think he's simply just phenomenal, really. And you know, like sometimes I think I'm doing well and I'm working in a few different countries and yet the live will be saved and I'll be thinking, oh, you know what, like I'm doing really well. And I go on Josh's page and like Josh is going to like 7 countries in like 2 weeks or something. I'm like, oh my goodness me, what an engine on the guy. Okay, so you see all my sections are coming forward. Now you can start to see the shape building up now as well, which is great. Can you see that silhouette? How it hugs the neck? That's great. Thank you so much. Oh, I love it. I love how you're all kind of talking. There's like a little community going on. I love that. Okay, so again, I'm taking my new section onto the previous. As I take my next section, again, flat back. Don't you move, flat back. So again, what do we do with the section on the ear and in front of the ear, the over direction changes. It doesn't come all the way back, because if it did, we would have an issue, because the increase in length would be too rapid. So we minimize the increase in length by reducing the over direction, and our body position is one of the main controls to that mechanic, because by moving, and I literally, like I said to my wife, please, please, please make sure the dog is quiet when I do my live. And she goes, don't worry about it. Of course I'll keep the dog quiet. And then literally 20 minutes in, the dog's barking as if the house is on fire. So that's fantastic. So again, all my sections are the same. It's actually, you know, in some ways, a graduated bob is an incredibly advanced haircut, because you have no real place to interpret it. You know, it's got to be what it is. It reads a certain way. You've got to follow it, and you've got to make sure it's correct. I personally love working with classic shapes, because I feel it's kind of obvious to me whether I've cut it correct or not. So when I was retraining, all I did was classic shapes. What's that going through? Can we go through this when you come? Oh yeah, of course. Hey Mia, how you doing? Oh, fantastic. Mia is literally our absolute rising star. I've had the privilege of spending 2 days training her. She works for an amazing salon called Top Salon, and I literally adore these guys. And yeah, Mia is only young, but she's really good at cutting hair. Really good. So I've had the privilege of training her one-to-one twice, and I'm going up there soon again to coach their team. So yeah, Mia, make sure you get a good night rest the night before, and I'll be there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So don't be alarmed as well, because a slight hole may appear in your length. You know, when you're doing a graduated bob, remember the length is cut at the end. The length is not cut at the start. But like the thing is, you know, like when you are teaching this haircut, at the very start there's quite a lot to explain, and then when you get higher up into the section, each section kind of repeats itself. Sorry, could you give advice when cutting the ear? Well, I mean, absolutely. You know, when I'm cutting over the ear, with this particular method right now, it wouldn't actually be a major concern, because obviously we're using elevation and over direction, so we're not forming a line until it's dry. But when I do cut over the ear, I tend to work with quite a low amount of tension on the baseline. I like all the hair to sit in natural fall. I like the hair to have breathed in before it's cut. When I say breathe in, remember what I meant by that. If I'm pulling this and cutting it with high tension, it's when it breathes in, it's going to lift, it's going to move, it's going to, you know, shift itself round. So when I cut around the ear with like a square graduation or a box bob or even an A-line bob, I assess the density of the hair, because the higher the density, the more the hair will expand anyway. I assess the curl pattern, you know, I assess the condition, and I will then assess things like, you know, the face shape, the head shape. I will assess the ears, all those types of things. And all those things will influence my choice of tension and my choice of cut, because I may cut through the comb, I may cut on the skin. If I cut on the skin, I'm using more tension. So if I'm cutting on the skin, I'm using more tension. So if I think the hair's quite thick, or I think the ears might be quite large, I wouldn't be cutting on the skin. I'd cut through the comb, because cutting through the comb uses less tension. What points of the head would I start a bob? Well, it depends on what type of bob you're talking about. So if you're cutting a bob, start where you want the most control. So I'm doing the pure graduation first, okay? So I'm cutting all the graduation first. So I started internally, because I wanted control over how the weight traveled vertically and how the weight formed and aligned horizontally. Had I have cut the outline in first, or the length in first, I would have been dictated to, from the length, how I cut the vertical shape, okay? So I wouldn't have wanted that. I would have wanted to have controlled that prior. Whereas if I'm cutting more like an A-line bob, or a line and graduation, I would argue that the length is actually the most important thing. So I would be cutting the length first. So I don't really look at it as it does one bob different to the other. I mean, some bobs you might do a convex layer, some you might be graduating, others, you know, whatever else. You might be disconnecting or undercutting. But if we're thinking classically, like this tutorial is a classic cut, the reason behind the starting position was where we wanted the control. We wanted the control of the position of the weight line, because the higher that weight line, the shorter the length at the front. So I needed full control over that before I continued with the haircut. So, and what controlled that? What controlled the position of my weight line? It was the choice of length of section 1. What controlled the characteristics of my weight line? Like, what controlled how heavy my weight line appeared? It was my elevation, how high or how low I allowed the section to be, and my distribution, my finger angle. The lower my fingers were angling to the horizontal section, the heavier the appearance would have been. The higher, the flatter. And my clips, I don't know if Josh is even still watching, my clips are from Josh and Stowe's my water spray. Look at that. The pocket water spray. What a great invention. So where's my guideline for these sections? Where has my guideline been for each of these sections? It's the previous section. So each section I'm cutting, I'm using the section that has just been cut each time as a guide. This ensures the increase in length traveling vertical is slower and softer, so I won't get heavy weight line in the appearance of my shape. Remember, we're not cutting the length until it's dry. Okay, I have a mannequin just over to my right hand side, which has been cut earlier today and it's been blow dried, and all I have to do is to put my outline in. So you will get to see how I put my outline in. I'll get to talk you through the 3 different methods of refining I use, and the 3 different ways in which I actually, yeah, I was going to say ARC actually will deliver. So it was like the best day of my life when they arrived. I thought, oh my God, clear my whole schedule. I need to really spend some time with my scissors. And I used every single pair. And like I said, the reason I advocate the pair I'm using, the Harmony in 5 inches, I prefer a smaller pair of scissors, in all honesty, because I feel I'm closer to what I'm cutting. But, you know, I see some incredible hairdressers and they're doing beautiful haircuts and they're using like 7-inch scissors. So I honestly will not tell you for a second like you've got to use a certain size, but I just prefer a small pair. And I like the fact that the tip of the blade is so fine and enabling me, when you see me refine in a moment, you'll see how much that helps. So, both sides are complete. We now release these 2 top sections, and our sections are taken parallel to the section, okay? Now, the difference here is that I like the outline to slightly extend and to have a little bit of softness, okay? So with this, I use a little bit more over direction at the very front due to the recession of the hairline. If I just pulled this straight out, as it fell to its natural fall, a hole would appear where the hairline has. And we don't want that. We do not want that. So, I'll take the other side exactly the same. Okay, I do love watching lives though, don't you all? And sometimes, because in the UK, obviously when the lives are on, it's like, not late, but it's like in the evening. So I'm like, oh, just to get me all settled off. Hi Sid, how you doing? I hope you're well. It's actually just about 7 watching Sid's lives. He's such a great guy, so good to watch. So again, where's my guideline coming from? Okay, so when you've been watching this, you'll know the answer to that. My guideline is coming from the previous section. So when we allow this veil to fall, we take the top of the weight line we've just cut, slightly thinner than that, And now you've got this. This is your guideline. So you've got to knit together this section and the section underneath. You've got to knit them together at a certain elevation. Now, how do you know which elevation is correct? Well, the lower you go, the heavier. The higher you go, the softer. So if you're not sure, remember what the rule was? I'm just going to repeat this in case you didn't see it. I go too low. If I feel lost, or if I've just lost concentration, or something's happened, I go too low. Now, when I go too low, a step has just appeared in my haircut. So we don't want a step. We don't mind if we can see where the weight is, but a step would indicate that my choice of elevation is incorrect. So I take the section and I will just pull it straight out. And when I pull it straight out, can you see here, there's about 3 to 5 millimeters that does not blend into my cross check. So when you're lost, go lower than you think, because the only negative is going to be that it's too long, okay? And then cross check it and evaluate the amount of hair that's coming off. So I know it's about 2 to 3 mil. So if I pulled my section, because the thing is, if I was to pull my section here or here, there's still going to be a guideline, okay? So how do we know then which elevation is the correct elevation? Well, it depends on the outcome you want, and that is influenced by the amount of hair the client has. So I'm going to go and look now for that 2 mil, and there it is. Okay, because personally, I'm not Sassoon trained. I've never really had any classic training, so I found a lot of this stuff incredibly difficult because I just didn't find it obvious. And one of the goals with my education is to take away the guesswork. I don't necessarily do creative work, which I adore. I really love seeing that in people's work. I just don't have that talent. But I like to be able to explain every single move I'm making. And sometimes when I have done something that is deemed as creative, I couldn't explain how I did it. So when I'm educating, I just like to work classically because I feel the mechanics of this haircut I can explain, you know? And I think when you cut a haircut as many times as I have this one, you kind of get a bit of hand memory. Your dexterity is improved. You know, the things that I can't really explain to you, I just know where that section's meant to go because it's very familiar, because I've rehearsed this haircut so many times. So one of the things I would say is, if you're trying to learn haircutting and it's just not clicking, don't give up, because it will click. This can all be learned. So everything I'm doing can be learned. I have absolutely zero talent, but the only reason I possess an element of skill is due to the sheer amount of practice I've put in, you know? Oh, thank you so much, Viv. I hope you're well, beautiful. What a lovely person. I do really enjoy doing this, because then I see people pop up and I'm like, oh my God, you know, and you get dead excited by it because you think, oh, I love their work, and you're taking the time to like watch me. It's amazing. So my sections are starting to get smaller. Don't be alarmed if that's the case. It's just that you're working on the same diagonal, but obviously as you get towards the front, the section is going to shrink. So don't be alarmed. And you know what's so nice is normally, and like I've trained Viv in person before, so you know, when you actually have to blow dry one of these, you're like praying that it's okay. Please let that weight line be soft. You know, and the beautiful thing about having the mannequin already dried today is I don't have to worry about that. So I can just literally go straight into it and rock and roll. But I mean, what type of things do you guys like to work on the most? At the moment, one of the things I'm really focusing on is the drying of my mannequins and drying of my clients. I feel sometimes my wrap drying is probably one of my weaker elements. So that's been one thing over August that I've really... the client had a parting, so the client had a side parting. I would always work to the parting, because if there is a side parting, okay, the lengths can't be the same. Because if they are the same, as they fall, one side will look shorter than the other. And what I prefer to do is to always work to whatever's natural in the hair. So if the client has a natural side parting, thank you for that question, I would absolutely work to their parting. I wouldn't be forcing it into the middle because it's not going to stay, is it? I mean, there's no hair products in the world that's stronger than gravity. So, you know, it's eventually that gravity is going to grab a hold of it. Yes, you do need this scissor. You absolutely do. It's just lovely. Oh, I do love cutting this shape. Okay, so I'm on my final section, everybody. And then we're going to be cutting the outline. So we've done just, I think we only have an hour to do a live. And I always get dead nervous and think, oh my God, I literally don't think I ever do any haircut and it's like under an hour. So that's why when I was chatting to the guys from Arc, I was saying, you know what, I'm going to get a mannequin and cut it first so it's all ready. Thank you so much, everybody, for your lovely comments so far. Okay, guys, so we have now done our wet cut. Are you all ready to see the dry cut? You're all ready to see the end result. I'm just going to pop that very gently over there because I don't want to waste the mannequin heads. Okay. So what we have here is we have the shape wrap dried. I haven't cut anything at all, and I really had to resist because I was thinking, oh my God, you know, people are going to think it's awful or something. But when it's dried, this is what you're going to get. Okay, so the thing with refining is there are three main. So actually, before I tell you that, oh, look at the silhouette. There we go. It's worked. We're okay. We're okay. Everything's okay. One thing I do is when I dry the hair, I have a choice of three main refining methods. One is club cutting. That's where the blade is kept flat and is parallel to the line I'm cutting. This is the most robust method of refining. Okay, it's the most robust. It's the one that's going to take away the most hair easy. Then you have what's called pointing, which using the very tip of the blade enables you to go under the line, remove graduation, and take very small amounts of hair. That's your fine-tuning method. Then you have chipping, which is going quite deep into the line and cutting parallel point cut into the line. That deflates the line and makes it look more shattered, which we're not going to be using that. But I'd like to explain those three methods to you prior. Okay. So what we do here is I always put a clip in. As the keratin in the hair obviously changes from alpha to beta and becomes pliable, before it cools, I put a no-mark clip in the hair to allow the hair to have a bend, because I'm going to use the furthest forward point here as a guide. Okay, so I'm going to allow my free hand to hold my scissor underneath. I'm going to just club cut. So I'm just club cutting. Okay. Now, once you've club cut it, you can now go through and start to point. So I'm going to go through and just point the very edges. Anything I see that I don't think looks correct, I'm just going to move this side out of the way a little bit so you guys can see. Okay, so as I'm going through this now, I use the very tip of my blade to remove very, very small amounts of hair. This is one of the biggest strengths of this model of scissor, is it is a precision cutter's scissor. I can get rid of millimeters of hair so easily. It's just ridiculous. Okay, so that's looking good. The next thing you're going to do is your line, this curved line, has to go into the back. Now I'm going to explain why the line curves, and I learnt this only recently from a man called Dove Palmer, who does lots of education, and he's one of the best in the world, to be fair. And he was indicating that when a line has a curve in it, it lightens the appearance of the graduation. If it was just forward and flat, the line, it looks heavier, it looks more dense. When you apply a curve to the line, it lifts and softens the appearance. So I'm using, the thing is, you check your line in 3 ways. You check your line from a distance, okay, like through a mirror. So I'm using a mirror over the other side of my studio. I've got a little trimmer, so you check above the line. I'm checking above the line, I use my trimmer and just flatten. You're not taking off, you're not sculpting your line with the trimmer. You're just flattening the appearance of the line. And when I did that, I then can see and watch the harmonies in action here. Look, they're taking away tiny little bits of hair so easily. That's why I use them. They're absolutely brilliant. Yeah, don't worry, we'll be adding it. I'll add it to my grid this live. So that's one side done. Let me just have a little look through the mirror. Ooh, it's a little bit thick here. So when I look here, it's just a little bit thick. So I'm going to go through and just take away a little bit more. That's better. See, I just love that little flick on the edge. It just works very nicely for me. Oh, they're so neat, these little scissors. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I honestly, like, I would only use something that I liked. I would never use it unless I really believed in what I'm using and like it. I would never use it to benefit anyone, but you know, and I would always want to have integrity in why I'm using something, you know. So now I come from the point here, okay, to this point here. So you are going to be using that point as a guideline. So I'm using club cutting here, yeah, is that, you can see that, and look how that emphasizes that shape, you know. So why am I club cutting? What would club cutting do for me as one of my refining options here? What is club cutting giving me? It's robust, isn't it? It allows me to take away a lot of hair quickly. That's why I would use it. Now, what am I doing here? I'm pointing. What's that doing? That's my fine tuning method. The robust is like the shotgun. This is like a sniper rifle. Yeah, it's going to let me take away very small amounts of hair. Oh, it's looking nice. It's looking good. What do you all think? Do you all like how it looks so far? Imagine if Ark left. It says Ark have left the conversation. Oh my God, I'm fired. Yeah, do not use that stuff again. So I'm using the trimmer. Why do I use the trimmer? What part of the line am I checking when I use the trimmer? I'm checking above the line. Remember, there's 3 ways we check a line. There's from a distance, there's underneath, and there's above. Hey, Extreme Cutting House. I hope you guys are well. Had the pleasure of working with them a while back. What a lovely group. So again, I'm using my little trimmer just to flatten the line off, okay? Okay, what do you all think? Ooh, it's balanced. That's something. We're still here. Okay, oh, hang on a second. It's okay, it's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay. So when you've finished your haircut, you've got to style it, okay? And the styling part for me is I'm going to use a very soft hairspray, medium hold hairspray. And just going through, I would just very gently use the hairspray itself and just allow that to rotate into where I want the curve. So when you're trying to take a photo on your Instagrams, before you do that, you want to be checking the haircut over again. And I would check it after I've sprayed it. And if you notice, when I've sprayed it, have you noticed how a slight ridge appeared? Do you see that? Now, I wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't have took that effort to just go over it a bit more. So again, if I suddenly have an asthma attack, we'll know why. It's fire. Thank you so much. That is looking lovely. A little bit heavy on the nape. I take forever doing anything I do. A little bit heavy just here. So when I look at that, and I think it's just a little bit heavy, one of two things you could do. You could take the line up a little bit higher, or you could just use your trimmer just to flatten it out. But some people would probably say, don't use your trimmer, you know, it's cheating or whatever. I mean, I would disagree. I think that the trimmer is doing something different, you know. Just going to take it a tiny bit higher. I think the choice of length I left at the nape was a little bit too long. So I'm just going to change that. Okay, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've had a whale of a time. I won't sleep tonight. But just to reiterate what I've done, what I've used. Because if you haven't joined until, let's say, the last 10 minutes, then you've literally missed some absolute pure fire, as someone said. Okay, so what we've done here is we have worked with a classic triangular graduation for you. Okay, I've been using my Harmony 5-inch shear. And what I tried to show you was like, for me, any scissors in the world, bear with me, can take away like 6 inches of hair in one go. But to take off 1 millimeter, they've got to be high quality scissors. And you saw how easy I got that cut for you. You know, so did everyone enjoy it? I'm not fired by ARC, that's good. Well, listen, I just want to say a massive thank you to ARC for allowing me to be part of the family. And thank you all for spending your time with us this evening. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And I'm sure I'll see you all soon. Take care, guys.